Hey everybody, Chris Masse here. Unless you've been living under a rock, you now know that James Franklin is no longer the Penn State football coach. Me, for one, I say thank God. I wanted him out a long time ago, and I'm not going to go all hot take rantish here. And I mean, I am shocked by the timing of it. I didn't expect it to happen this so soon. It's a pretty amazing fall from grace too. One, be a play or two away from going to the national championship game last year, and then two, being 3-0 and number two in the country 2 weeks ago with a lead in overtime against Oregon, to 2 weeks later being out of a job. But I think Penn State made the right call here. I think if they truly want to win a national championship, they got to go elsewhere. And I've said that for years. I've never been a James Franklin guy. I contend, and I said this a lot last year too, that the only reason they got so close to the title game last year and got to the Final Four was because they had the easiest tournament draw anybody could ever possibly dream of. They lucked into a dream bracket where they had to beat SMU and Boise State to get to the Final Four. Neither who, shocker, was a top five team. If they were, James Franklin wouldn't have beaten them. You see that happen when they played Notre Dame in the semifinals, and that was, again, that it couldn't be any more gift wrapped for Franklin last year because he had that easy road, and then Notre Dame was beset by injuries. Their offensive line was ravaged by injuries. They had injuries in the backfield. The quarterback was playing hurt, and they still couldn't get it done. So we flash forward to this year. This is supposed to be the year. They went out. They spent an inordinate amount of money on Jim Knowles, the Ohio State defense coordinator. He's been a dumpster fire as well. All these guys come back. Drew Aller comes back. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. They get some good wide receivers in the transfer portal, and they look bad in the three games against what basically were Division III teams, in my opinion, which – why James Franklin and Penn State scheduled those games, I'll never understand. They did nothing but hurt them in the long run. And all the problems that were starting to manifest themselves there came crashing home the last three games. It's one thing to lose to Oregon. They were undefeated. They had, before Indiana beat them this week, I think they had won 18 straight regular season games. But the UCLA and Northwestern losses, inexcusable. On the field, because we won't get into the most embarrassing and the most hideous part of Penn State football history off the field, but on the field, these were the most two embarrassing losses in program history. I mean, UCLA, Penn State became only the fourth team ever as a top 10 team to lose to somebody that was winless after 4 games or more, the first team since 1985. And then you compound that by coming home and losing to Northwestern, who – they're turning things around. Now they're 4-2, but come on, it's Northwestern. You're supposed to be You are Penn State. You're supposed to be a national title contender. You got all these dudes back from last year. Inexcusable. And it wasn't. And I think what Penn State knew was they were starting to lose recruits. Guys were starting to opt out. I think they saw the handwriting on the wall. You look at the schedule. They've got at Iowa this week. That's going to be a tough game. Even when they've been really good, that's been a tough game at Iowa. Ohio State in the next week, that's a loss. You give James Franklin the best player at every position in Penn State history, and he would still find a way to lose to Ohio State. And they've got Indiana coming up, who we'll get to later, but Indiana, who's made an amazing turnaround and has a competent coach, a great coach. So that's probably a loss. So all of a sudden you go from being a team that was supposed to possibly win a national championship to you might not even make a bowl game. So I think James Franklin looked like he was beaten at this point. I think he knew if you watched the UCLA game afterward, he stopped on the field and looked around. He kind of had that 1,000 mile stare to him. I think he knew that his time was just about up at Penn State, and I think. Listen, he did some really good things. Some people try to give him too much credit and say, oh, he brought the program back from nowhere. Actually, Bill O'Brien started doing that. And I think if Bill O'Brien hadn't taken the Houston Texans job, which he should have, some people said he should have been loyal, blah, blah, blah. They throw that kind of money at you. take the job. So I think Bill O'Brien built the program up, and Franklin did a good job keeping it going from there and digging Penn State out of the sanctions that they were under after the Jerry Sandusky debacle. But it plateaued. I think what we know about Franklin is he's a terrible game day coach. I'll say that. I think he's a good recruiter. I think he can motivate kids, but you see the same problems all the time every year, especially it gets magnified when he plays teams with similar or a bit better talent. He just can't get the teams over the top. He's not that guy. He is what he is at Vanderbilt. He did a great job there building that program up, getting them to be respectable. But if Penn State's serious about trying to be a perennial national title contender, they had to make this move. They got to find somebody who's over the top. Now, a counter to that is some people are saying, well, James Franklin he had a lot of 10-2 seasons, a lot of 11-2 seasons. He did. That's fine. That's great. If you were Rutgers or somebody, go hire James Franklin. If that's great. That's what you want. Those programs, the Rutgerses of the world, the Nebraskas of the world, they used to be a dynasty. Now they're basically irrelevant. They would kill for a resume like that. But when you're Penn State and you envision yourself as an Alabama type school, an Ohio State type school, Michigan, LSU, go down the line there. He's not the guy. You need somebody to get you over the top. I kind of liken it to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the early 2000s. Tony Dungy had turned the Buccaneers around. He had made them a perennial playoff team, but they just couldn't get – they made it to the NFC Championship in 99, and then they kind of plateaued from there, and they kept losing in the divisional round and a wild card round. They bring in John Gruden. They win the Super Bowl the next year, in Gruden's first year. Not saying that Dungy's in the Hall of Fame. John Gruden's not. But that something needed to change. They needed somebody to get them over the top there. They needed kind of an anti-Tony Dungy. He was the nice, friendly coach. Gruden's the in-your-face, sparking, gnarly kind of coach. And I think they needed that to get over the top. That's where Penn State is right now. They need somebody to get them across the finish line. And people keep saying, they might regret this, because if they start going 6-6 and 7-5 every year, they'll long for the days of James Franklin. You're right, but I'm willing to make that change because I'm a Penn State alum, and what's the point? And like the great Ricky Bobby said, if you ain't first, you're last. So what's the point of going 10-3 or 11-2? If you're never going to win a national championship or get to a national championship, win the whole thing. Now with the playoffs, now it's not like one loss kills you in the past. That's why I don't understand how Franklin couldn't rally this team after the Oregon game, because as disappointed as the team was and everybody else was, everything was still in front of them. All they had to do was, even if they lost to Ohio State, if they won every other game, they still had a good shot at getting to the playoffs. So I don't understand why they couldn't rally and why he couldn't reel the team back in and get them focused. But my point is, they've got to, if you want to win the whole thing, he's not your guy. So if they do make the wrong hire and they slip back into mediocrity, that's a bummer, but it's still, you had to make that change. You got to go for the brass ring. So you got to make a change. I mentioned Indiana, Coach Curt Cignetti. He's the guy I would want. What he's done in Indiana is pretty remarkable. I think they're in the top 5 for the first time. I don't think it's ever, but it feels like forever. They're legitimately a national title contender, and we're an absolute dumpster fire a couple years ago. He's the guy I would want. I keep hearing Matt Rule. He's got the Penn State connections. Don't do it, Penn State. He's a James Franklin clone. Look at it. I got Franklin's record here again. He was 1-15 against top 5 teams, 4-21 against top 10, 15-28 against top 25. If you look at do your research on Matt Rule, you'll see his numbers aren't too far off from that. Don't go there. I don't care about the Penn State connections. That you don't need Penn State connections for this job. You got to find the best guy for the job. So I like Curt Cignetti. If not him, find somebody up and coming. People for years have said, well, who are you going to get? Who are you going to get that's better than Franklin? I don't know. We'll find out. There's somebody out there. I mean, life is a gamble. Anything in sports is a gamble. So, yeah, it's a gamble going away from James Franklin. But I'm confident they can find a guy to get them over the top. What Franklin did well is he brought in good players. What he did bad, he did not make those good players better. Look at Drew Aller. I mean, he completely destroyed that guy's career. Did the same thing with Christian Hackenberg. If you remember, Christian Hackenberg was being talked as a top 5 pick when Bill O'Brien was his coach. Franklin comes in. He was drafted in the 3rd round by the Jets. If you're drafted in the 3rd round of the Jets, that's like being drafted in the 17th round by a competent NFL team. And the Jets, in the midst of a 1-2 win season, wouldn't even play Hackenberg. So that tells you how bad Christian Hackenberg got. And that's the way Franklin's been. Look at all the wide receivers that don't pan out here. Guys that were supposed to be great. Nobody pans out. The offensive lines are perennially mediocre. So he might bring in great players, but now they need somebody that can keep bringing in great players and can also coach those good players and make them better. Franklin couldn't do that. So I'm sure there's people that are out there that are upset about James Franklin's firing. I think I'm in the majority when I say, yay. It was time to move on. This year's a total loss anyway. I don't even know if they'll make a bowl game. Personally, I don't care. I hate the bowl system. I think it's stupid. I hated it for years when we only had, growing up, the best 2 teams often didn't play each other because you had these stupid conference affiliations with the bowl games. Like Penn State in 94 couldn't play Nebraska for the national championship. Then you had the stupid BCS, and you only had 2 teams in, and then 4. They finally got it right. The point being, I don't even know where I was. I don't know what my point is and all that. I'm just ranting about things right now. But it was the right call right now, especially with the playoffs. Now you got a legitimate chance to be in the hunt every year, and they need somebody that can consistently bring out the best in Penn State. James Franklin wasn't that guy, so I guess thanks for what you did for over the years. You helped Penn State out over the years, James Franklin, but adios. I am not going to miss big game James and the constant failures in big games and constantly getting out-coached and outmanned in big games. So I think it's a good thing for Penn State, and hopefully it's upward and onward for here. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I got to say about that. So we'll rant about next, probably about all the 49ers that are injured right now. I mean, it's the curse of Bill Walsh. I think idiot John York, Jed York's father, stupidly fired him as the GM after he had rebuilt the team in 2001, 2002. And I'm convinced that Bill Walsh has put a hex on the 49ers because anybody that is good for that team gets injured and usually out for the season. So stop it, Bill. There's a lot of us who still love the Niners, and we want to see them do well, and you just keep destroying our players. So maybe we'll dive into that next week. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But until then, have a good one.